Well, thank you, everyone. Nice to be on and to be talking through this exciting new grant opportunity. I'll just to introduce myself. My name is Isaac Baker. I am one of the co-founders and the co-CEO at Resonant Energy. And one of my many efforts over the years has been to continue to expand and increase our work with affordable housing, and have gotten to spend about 6 or 8 months of the last year working with some folks at the DEP about making this this grant that was formerly only available to public entities available to nonprofit affordable housing providers, and a few other parts of the market as well, or private nonprofits and other organizations. So excited to be at this point where this grant is about to be launched, and we are giving you the sneak peek ahead of the formal launch, so that the folks who are ready to pounce are in the best position to apply. So excited to be here and to support that. And I'll pass it back to you, Misha.
All right, cool. Thank you. So just quick introduction on myself. My name is Misha Thomas. I am a business development manager with Resonant Energy. So we'll just go ahead and dive in, because I know everyone's pretty excited to figure out what's going on with this. So I guess just a little bit more about Resonant. We essentially, for those of you that have not worked with us so far, we essentially act as a construction management role. We take solar development projects from letter of intent all the way to the install. We have a dedicated analysis team that will do any due diligence necessary to make sure that we are capitalizing off of the maximum long-term savings on solar for you all. We also work closely with a range of different financiers to provide cost savings and support on the financial side. So a couple of different affordable housing and projects that we've done. Like Isaac was mentioning, we work extensively with nonprofits for affordable housing, houses of worship. And we're just excited to continue supporting in the ways that we can. So some of the basics around this grant. Originally, it was presented by the state to provide funding for municipalities. But this is the first year that they're extending that to nonprofits, affordable housing, and a range of other qualified candidates. So we'll share some of the eligibility in a couple slides down. They've basically released $7.5 million. 2.5 million will be available to private entities. 5 million will be available to public entities. Just given the time and they're opening it up. We're waiting for them to open it up. However, we predict that the grants will be due sometime between June and July. So that gives us, just based on the range of projects that we feel like will be able to send in at this time, we'll likely only be able to, we can foresee that basically there'll be 12 to 15 successful applicants, just based on the short span of time that we have to disseminate this process. It's still very much in the development phase, and as mentioned, they're yet to release the grant to the public. So we do definitely suggest that folks that are interested in this sign up for our newsletter, or sign up for the Mass DEP's newsletter. There is one specifically for the grant on the grant website, so that'll get you the most recent updates available as soon as that's out and available to the public. Excuse me. Key decision makers on this, Mass DEP and the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. Again, just based on the background of the grant, the real purpose is to try to provide funds that fill in the space for renewable energy and energy efficiency for nonprofits. This will also cover food distribution centers, commissaries, and nonprofit agriculture. The real priority here is dollars saved, or energy saved per dollar spent of the grant. It is a reimbursable grant, which means you would already have to have provided capital upfront. The state will then reimburse you after the completion of the project, and it is based on the projected cost. So again, of the funds available, there are $200,000 per application per site. So of the 90% that will be reimbursable, that 10% would have to be put forth by the organization. There is some room for flexibility and exemptions in here, but that's, again, room for further discussion and exploration on a case-by-case basis. So eligible entities, we've got small business, food and distribution centers, nonprofit agriculture and food distribution, nonprofit affordable housing, and the original attendees for the grant prior to this year were the wastewater municipalities and districts. Really, in terms of residents' involvement in disseminating the funds, we support solar, but we did want to give folks an idea of other sorts of energy efficiency projects that we might be able to bundle in addition to solar to make for an appealing grant, and as they again are prioritizing energy saved to grant dollars. So a couple of ideas. We know folks have been looking at different things, solar water heating. I think a couple of folks we've spoken to have some repairs and some other energy efficient things they've been looking into. So it's kind of just worth having this here, and we will send out the slide deck to you all after the presentation, so you can kind of look through this and see if any of these have come up in your conversations with your teams as well. Couple of things that the grant does not cover: any prep or electrical work, any additional roofing work. There are, in some ways, we can put that under the 10% that would be required for the for an organization to apply. The remaining 90% would be reimbursable by the grant, but that there are some instances where we could potentially fit repairs into that top 10%. And again, so for that scope of work, that would be kind of where we can talk about other potential financing options, which we'll get to in another deeper slide. But that's kind of one of the gray areas we did want to make folks aware of. As a part of the grant, we also need to have an energy assessment done prior to applying. So in some cases, sites might already have had something like this done. And cases where it's not, it's just there's some concern with the timing, because again, we're looking for this to be released relatively soon, with due dates between June and the end of June and July. So the likelihood that there will be time to have an energy assessment done in the midst of applying it's a little bit of a tight timeline. So we want to try to make sure folks have either already had one done in the past or would be ready to have one done as soon as possible. Project timing, again, this is looking to fund grants that will be completed within the next 2 years of application date. So in addition to, we know that this is meant to fill in the gap between project cost, but obviously a lot of organizations will still need support with that upfront cost when funding their projects. This is to give some sort of idea of an idea of different eligible financing strategies that Resonant uses. We do have direct ownership, which is your organization would purchase the cost of the array upfront, using some sort of in-house funds or any other revenue streams that you have access to. We have a solar power agreement or a hybrid model where we would work with one of our solar financiers to provide 12% of the upfront cost of your project in exchange for the federal tax benefits. Once the 6 years necessary of ownership is completed for them to receive those tax credits, they essentially fall off as the owners of the array in name only, and the ownership will switch over to the organization. So that cost would be the cost minus the 12% upfront discount. That project cost would be the cost we would use to apply for the grant as a reimbursable grant benefit. We also, through our solar financiers, where we do have a collective sons philanthropic loan, which is the Sun for All. It is something that we can pair with the hybrid ownership model, just as an additional buffer to, we know, it's the upfront cost can be pretty steep for some organizations. So that's something we can kind of bundle inside of the hybrid model to make a little bit more approachable, to act as a more approachable option for organizations. And again, you'll receive this information if anyone is interested or finds that they might want more information on the Sun for All. We're happy to provide, set up a follow-up call and see what that would look like if your organization is eligible. So what a successful application might look like, just based on how these things overlap and kind of play with each other. Really, what we gather from the DEP is, again, the top priority is going to go to grantees that can prove that the lifespan of their energy efficiency endeavors, their solar array, is going to directly benefit the organization in a positive, as a positive investment. So it's energy saved to dollars spent of the grant. We assume that, let's see. All right. Just based on our conversations with the team at the DEP, the more an organization can provide, they're really looking for your investment in this, in energy efficiency. So the more an organization can provide the portion of that upfront cost, the more appealing it's going to be to the DEP. Again, and so we're thinking we're really highlighting organizations that have already signed up or are ready to go with solar, have some sort of funding already available that they can put towards their project, and are in a position to take advantage of some reimbursable funds. That coupled with organizations that are already looking towards energy efficiency, and more than just solar, because that's really what they're wanting to see, is how deeply are you invested in being energy efficient. So it's we can certainly apply for just solar, but we do get the sense that solar plus is really going to make them feel good about the grant and make them feel like this is a successful program that we're rolling out. Do you have anything that you'd like to add, Isaac?
No, I think that's a good summary. I think that there's enthusiasm for pairing with energy efficiency. I think there's also, this is the first time they're providing this grant to affordable housing providers, and there's a challenge in pairing this with energy efficiency, which is that lean covers a lot of the improvements that might be needed for affordable housing that are kind of the low-hanging, high leverage opportunities. So figuring out what is the sort of non-lean types of improvements you could make to the building that actually have an upfront cost that aren't astronomically large, that this grant would not actually really help with, is a little bit of a challenge as I've been thinking about it. But to the extent we can come up with something, they are going to view that more favorably. And honestly, even just saying as part of the solar, we got a lean assessment and we're going to do some lean improvements that are fully funded by lean alongside the solar or what have you. I imagine that won't go along, but I think that wouldn't to say that you're doing that kind of as part of this overall initiative, even if you don't need outside funding for it, to help make your proposal more attractive for them to fund.
I'll also add that new construction is still on the table for this program. So just some requirements. Proof of ownership, again, the lean or the mass save energy assessment. Resonance is available to help with the feasibility study. As with all of our solar projects, we do a pretty in-depth look at your ability to host solar, your savings over time, and provide some initial drawings with that. So that is a piece that we will provide, documentation, your financial viability, financial incentives, any of those things, green communities grants, if you are a public entity, SMART, which is another thing that Resonant will provide, and then any other potential secured funding sources that the organization will have. So in terms of next steps, we, interesting, a couple of things missing. But in terms of next steps, typically what that would look like from a Resonance perspective is that we would start the process of getting you hooked up with one of the energy assessments, making sure that all that documentation is there. If you don't already have that, we will then take a look at your property. We'll look at the roof ages and do our general internal assessment, which is pretty standard for our solar projects. Then we will take a look at what the grant application would look like, move towards for the LOI, and kind of talk about next steps in terms of what it would look like for reimbursement once the project is completed. We will leave space for questions. Oh, that's how this works. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So again, so we've got the energy assessment, we'll do a solar audit, the grant application, and then we'll look for the letter of intent and move forward with the standard procedure with getting folks signed up with solar. So highly advised, again, please go on the GAP Grants website, the link is here. Sign up for the email newsletters from them and as well as from Resonant. Any new information that comes out, you all will be the first to know as soon as we know. And we'd be happy to set up an additional conversation with anyone that would be interested in moving forward. But I'll open it up for questions. Isaac and myself are both here, and we'll kind of let folks jump in.
And Misha, I think if you stop sharing your screen, we can see everybody a little easier, and that would be a nice transition.
I'm sure.
So I think what I'll add to as we move into the Q&A, so not all of you, but I would say at least 70% of the folks who have gotten on this list are folks that we're already working with in some capacity in partnership with LISC through our Solar Technical Assistance Retrofit Program, STAR program, to be analyzing solar opportunities for existing affordable housing organizations. So this is a pretty easy, I think the sort of brass tacks of this are, there's going to be about 12 projects that get funded that are not going to be public projects, meaning some mix of agricultural, affordable housing, whatever. We're talking 12 to 15 organizations will get 200 grand to cover up to 90% of solar and energy efficiency. There are some folks on the call who have been really psyched about solar and storage, which is kind of expensive and a little bit hard to do. This could be a fun time to figure that out if that's a priority. There are others on the call who may, and noting that a challenge with solar plus storage is adding the storage is not going to necessarily wildly increase your savings. It's going to increase your upfront capital cost and therefore your grant ask without increasing your savings. So the storage is not necessarily the most strategic item in terms of the grants selection criteria, which are dollars invested to total savings. So the types of things that have really high leverage for dollars invested to total savings, solar is pretty good. Obviously the lowest hanging fruit are like LED retrofits and the things like that that are covered by lien. So finding opportunities where there's some dollar that can be invested to help create savings, whether that's with, water or energy efficiency or air source heat pumps or, anything you might be considering on that kind of general building electrification front, the good opportunity. And if you already have a process in place with us where you're planning on doing solar and installing it this year, there is an opportunity to just, put in an application and say, hey, we were planning on buying solar anyway, but let's just try and get some of it back by putting in an application to get some funding for it. So I'd say in terms of like the lightest lift, like I'll just call some folks out, right? We've got like Urban Edge on the call. You guys have a new construction project coming up that we've looked at. That would be one easy one for you to choose to just say, we'll apply for that new construction project. We're going to build it in the next 2 years. We'll do solar. And if there's anything we can call efficiency in there, we'll lump it in. There's an easy application. The analysis is already done. We have that same setup in place already with many of you on the call, where we have kind of outstanding analysis and proposals. We can just sort of pick our favorite project and activate and get a project submitted. And Caitlin at Alston Brighton, you guys have a bunch pending on that front as well, and many others on this call. So I think what I'm hoping in this Q&A session, and I would invite people to like brainstorm and think out loud if anyone wants to use the space for that. But I think there's a question too of like, just you all have lots of projects that this could work on, right? So there is a little bit of question of how to pick, right? And what we're hoping to do, I think fairly soon, is to help organizations get clear on like, this is our best project, and we're going to start doing the paperwork and like the effort that it's going to take to have this be a winning application. And to Misha's point, especially getting that efficiency audit or assessment done by Mass Save or by Lean is the most critical time sensitive thing between now and the grant deadline. So if you pick a project that doesn't have that, you want to be calling Mass Save or Lean today to get that scheduled, to make sure that we have the best chance of having that in hand before the application deadline hits this summer. So that's my brass tacks item. And then the reason we've recommended new construction or rehab is, of course, just that the grant operates on a reimbursement basis. So you got to have some cash on hand. And our thinking is that if you are already planning to buy a whole solar array, that's simply telling the state like, hey, now we're going to buy half a solar array and you're going to reimburse us for half. That will look attractive to them because you're already planning to put up 50% of the capital needed, and they only need to put in 50% of the capital. And they don't need to know that you were already planning to buy the whole thing anyway, and they can feel like they're kind of plugging a gap, so that's a sort of slightly more cynical take on it, but an opportunity to have them help fund something that is already running. And then there is, the sort of the spirit of the grant, which is like trying to truly catch opportunities that are like right on the edge of happening, but wouldn't happen anyway, but for this grant. And if we have something that the stars really align and the timing is good, and we can do both solar and efficiency and have it all meet the spirit of the grant, even better. But I think as I've discussed with the funders, the combination of the reimbursement model makes it hard to use on anything other than a project where there's already funding available. And then like a rehab or a new construction project. And the combination of the timeline, which is that they're going to announce this grant in I would say the next week or two formally with all the final stuff. And then they're going to request that the grant applications are fully in and fully assessed, definitely before the end of the summer, if not towards the end of June or July. So folks are going to have 8 weeks to sprint towards this in order to get this application in. And it's, $200,000 is a good funding stream. That's non-trivial. So we want to make sure that people are in the best position to use it. But I offer all of that as context to say that we have been actively communicating with the DEP and are hopeful that we will help them evolve this grant over time to both have more funding and be more suitable for nonprofit affordable housing as we go. And this was really kind of the first step in the direction for the DEP of even opening it to affordable housing at all. And there's going to be a lot of learning from them, I think, through this process. And hopefully next year we will have a better go at it. But for now, I think this will be a kind of funding what's already in the stream. So I'll pause, but want to open it up to see if folks have any specific ideas. What about this site? You know, anything like that we can help with.
So the state is providing $200,000 a grant, and so the organization has to come up with the other half of the money, which could be going to one of these hybrid ownership pieces, and also some of the money from the organization's fund to add to this as a package of financing it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Harold, thinking about veterans benefit and your instance, I know you guys have been looking at that hybrid ownership because as a nonprofit, you can't directly use the tax credit. So any place you're looking at doing solar, right, you get that hybrid ownership where you effectively sell the solar tax credit for about 12% of the total cost of the system. You're then responsible for the remaining 88% of the cost of the system. So let's just imagine that scenario, a simple scenario. So let's say you've got a solar system that's going to cost $100,000 to put on a project. You use the hybrid ownership, that knocks the cost down to $88,000 because you're selling off the tax credit through that setup. With that remaining $88,000, this grant will technically reimburse you for up to 90% of that, right? So like, broad strokes, that would have you your organization putting in somewhere around $10,000, right? And then they could reimburse you for the rest. So in effect, you'd have to put in the 88 up front, and you could get a request to get reimbursed for up to 90% of that total funding for a given project. So there's a question for sponsors, which is, if you are not doing an active rehab and you don't have just $100,000 of funding sitting around in the project, you're probably not going to want to use your on-hand cash reserves. So there's a little bit of a question for your board, which is, do you want to use kind of parent level nonprofit sponsor cash effectively to fund it's almost like providing your own construction financing, right? Where you're going to pay for the milestones to get this system installed, and then you'll get reimbursed for 90% at the end. But there's this question of where's that money going to come from until the reimbursement happens. And, maybe you can figure out a loan to cover that, and we can support folks working on that. Or you can have that come from other sources. And as Misha mentioned, we do have a subsidized loan program that pairs with this. So there is but that loan program is really a term loan, right? So they don't want to give you a loan just to basically cover the bridge of the grant, right? Of, covering the first couple months, right? And then you reimburse them and pay the loan back. They want to provide you a 10-year term loan or what have you. So it's a little bit complex to think through how if you're not doing an active rehab, how you're going to have that capital on hand.
I think it also this is John Harden from Lawrence Community Works, and Isaac, I think we're working with Resonant on, I want to say several projects, but I haven't been the point person on them, so I'm not exactly sure where we are on that. But I think one of the challenges this also presents is on any project funded with LITEC. My understanding is that it can create an issue for the tax credit investors because of the value of new system going onto the building, although I do think there are ways around it. My more specific question though is that we have talked, I believe we have talked to you guys about a couple of buildings we have that are, more recently completed projects that we are looking to install solar on. And there is a third building that has solar on it already, but that I would like to look into doing other energy upgrades on. And I'm wondering if, if there's not a solar component, is this still a viable source?
Yes, without question. So they are definitely going to look into applications that do not have solar. Because solar is all that Resonant does, we are basically, our team is committing to help you write the grant and to help you put all the pieces together if it includes solar, because that's what we do. However, you do not need to work with us on this, and you are free to submit this grant without us. And I think that the applications that will be most competitive will include elements of both solar and efficiency based on the conversations we've had. But they will absolutely entertain non-solar, straight efficiency applications. And the question, as always, will just be dollars invested to dollars saved. So do you have a really compelling, non-solar thing that you want to invest in that's going to have a really good, effective grant ROI?
Yeah, we definitely have one project, the duck mill, that that I know we want to do solar on, but there are also other upgrades that I want to do, and I know the management company is working with somebody to do lighting retrofits, to it, which seems to be like part of the low-hanging fruit that you mentioned earlier. It's the easiest thing to get done, but I also want to do lockout thermostats in the apartments, which nobody seems to have any interest in. I suspect we will need to get lean out there maybe to do more, a more formal analysis of this.
Yeah, for sure. And John, we've looked at the, looking at that duck mill project in particular, we've looked at that building, as I understand it, is under a low-income housing tax credit restriction. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It was also under historic restrictions, but those have expired now. So physically putting the array on the roof is not so much of a problem anymore, but yeah, I think we still need to solve the question of whether it winds up negatively impacting the LIHTC status.
Yeah, for sure. So I think because of that, and I can just say, and this maybe partially answers Lena's question, what we recommend typically for building owners who have existing properties that are within their low-income housing tax credit compliance period, we recommend going with a no-cost power purchase agreement in order to integrate solar into those buildings. I think that there is the thing that you're interested in doing with the energy efficiency investment in the individual. So like I could see you, LCW, putting in an application to say, we're going to do a no-cost solar thing on the roof because that's going to be easiest with our LIHTC investors. And then we're going to request a grant to figure out how to cover 90% of our thermostat upgrades across the property, noting that those thermostat upgrades are only going to create savings for tenants and not for you as the building owner, which they would be fine with, I think, as far as this application goes. But you need to be able to model out what the thermostat investment, savings are. And I know that there are pro formas of, how scheduled thermostats and, monitoring can create savings for individual property owners. So just as a brainstorm, that's one way you could do it. As far as the integration of the power purchase agreement, Lena, with tax exempt bonds and 4% LIHTC, my understanding is that those are two different things. So a power purchase agreement is a no-cost solar financing solution that is basically just pay as you go solar with a lease on the roof. That is compatible with low-income housing tax credits, and that's fine. Where there is potentially a challenge that Lena, you and I ran across for a Nuestra property we were looking at this past year, is with tax exempt bonds, which would be your senior debt associated with the project. Some tax exempt bonds, because of their sort of federal designation, will provide restrictions on how you can lease the property, because the federal money, they don't want you just leasing the building to Dunkin' Donuts or whomever on a market rate basis. They want you to lease to other nonprofits and what have you. And the challenge is solar on the roof. Technically, you're leasing your roof to a for-profit third-party entity. And so that tax exempt bond language does not always, but can add a wrinkle that makes a no-cost PPA or third-party financing type setup for solar incompatible, which is just kind of an oversight to do with our federal bureaucracy of like, it is not the intention of tax exempt bonds to prevent solar from going on the roof, but it is an inadvertent outcome of the current way that tax exempt bond deals come together. And again, it depends a little bit on the lender of what I'll say. We are looking at with the neighborhood developers right now, where they have a scattered site rehab that we're doing with them, and we're looking into power purchase agreements or no cost solar as part of their rehab. And they do have a tax exempt bond, and their bond financer, which the bond was bought by Citibank, has provided indicative feedback saying they think it won't be a problem. So just to say, it's not 100% of the time a problem, but it is potentially a wrinkle, if that's helpful, Lena, in answering your question. And John, I'll just clarify for you, just for Lawrence Community Works, that we're doing solar and storage on 11 sites with Lawrence Community Works, with the project that your colleague is going to be passing over to you. So we'll look forward to chatting with you about that.
Yeah, I knew that we were looking at quite a bit on those. This is a little off topic, Isaac, but does Resonant do like homeowner scale systems, or are you guys strictly more like commercially focused?
Yeah, so right now we do, the answer is that it depends. We have a flagship program that's called our Solar Access Program that is designed to help low-income homeowners be able to install solar. We're currently running, we've been selected by the city of Boston as part of Mayor Wu's Solarize East Boston to try and get more solar onto residential buildings in East Boston. And we're helping to integrate financing that will be no upfront cost, no credit score requirements, and a kind of a true, a new financing tool we've built that makes solar really accessible in low-income communities that we've been piloting in Dorchester for the last few years. So that is the one example of single family that we're doing. And I would say so the short answer is we're generally not doing single family or, helping affluent homeowners in the suburbs do it. But if there's a strong case that we can help low-income families do solar, that is a sort of a mission-based activity we take on to a small degree as an organization.
Yeah, we should talk about that also. We have a cluster of homes that we've built over the years, some of which were built to be solar ready, and they're all affordable homeowners, lower income homeowners, I should say. I'd like to be able to present some options to people as opposed to them, possibly getting victimized by some of the shall we say, less honest companies that are out there.
Yeah, we would be happy to chat with you about that, and are definitely sensitive to that outcome. I don't know if you all have seen the news of the recent Solarize Yarmouth and the residential installer going out of business after taking 50% deposits on systems from many homeowners across the city. And there is a lot of uproar about that, understandably, because people have, on the face of it, lost tens of thousands of dollars through a city vetted solar program. So there is definitely in solar a challenge in the residential market with a race to the bottom on economics, and a lot of bankruptcies that are happening periodically that then leave people in the lurch. So we are happy to help navigate that as we can. Any other questions that are coming up for folks as you're thinking about projects?
Hi, this is Marty from New Ecology. I don't have a project question, but just a practical question about the audits. Do they need to have been done within a certain number of years or something like that? Is there any criteria around how recent those audits are?
Currently, there is not. And Misha, I'll let you plug in if you have a sense on that.
No, I've had the same question asked a couple different times. I think that somewhere on the bottom of the audit, there probably is a date or some length of time they give you for that still to be valid or relevant. I would go by that, but there isn't anything that's been released by the grant that speaks to that.
So it may be that when the more formal announcement comes in the next few weeks, which we will be providing you all with updates on, that there are more parameters that are added to it. My guess is that that's going to be an area of oversight or something that does not get, specifically written down. And so I think that if there's especially given the challenge in getting a new audit done, I think having a historical audit from a few years ago and applying to the grant with that, noting that there might be some price changes and some other pieces of the puzzle to figure out could be a way to go. And I think there's a challenge, which is, if you did the audit a few years ago and it was air source heat pumps and the price quoted for the air source heat pump intervention was, X dollars, it's probably going to be potentially a little bit higher right now. And so I think if a nonprofit sponsor were going to use an older audit, they would need to be prepared to potentially cover the difference in cost once you got an updated audit if the cost went up. And just the reason being that the grant is going to be for a fixed dollar amount and they're not going to provide more. So once you apply for your grant and you lock in your 200,000 that they're going to give to you, they're not going to give you 210 if the air source heat pump cost ends up going up later. And for folks who are joining us a little bit later, I just wanted to invite you all into the discussion. So what we have been discussing, we've made it through the sort of general content. Welcome Mario and others. And we are just in an open discussion right now about possible ways that this funding could be used and allocated and ideas. The high level summary has been that we are recommending this grant opportunity as an opportunity for helping to fund a solar or energy efficiency affiliated with a new construction or a rehab. And for everybody picking one building and focusing on getting that energy efficiency assessment done, especially if it's a rehab in an existing building or dusting off an old one, as Marty from New Ecology just reminded us is a good option here as well. And I will reopen it just to see if folks have any other questions or ideas that we can help with.
Yeah, I have a question around we're changing use, right? So we have a building that the Capitol Theater building that we're going to turn into some affordable housing, but it's not, there's no apartments there now. So I don't know would we still need an energy assessment, or how would that work in terms of getting one?
That is an interesting question that I do not know the answer to, because it's not eligible for lien yet, because it's not deed restricted. So in theory, I would say that, you know, in terms of the energy efficiency landscape, you would still be treated as a commercial space, and therefore would have to go through the sort of commercial process, which would be via mass save instead of lien, but ultimately still could. And I think for that Capitol Theater project, you could just simply apply for the solar only on that one if the energy efficiency ends up being too much of a hassle to wrangle, or you know, fairly low lift to just give Mass Save a call and have them come out and see what they're willing to do. And you could take a little bit of that with a grain of salt, which is that once you have that deed restriction, you're going to get more funding and support from lien than you would from Mass Save. So it might be strategic to not actually do the Mass Save based work until you're deed restricted.
So if we were only doing solar, could we skip the audit altogether, you think? Because I think the array is going to be more than big enough that the 200,000 could be used only on the solar array.
Yeah, I think if you put that in your, you know, I think if you put in the application, you know, we're changing use, we're not able to get the lien assessment yet. We're going to get the lien assessment and move forward with the sort of basic fully funded measures. That they would take that probably as a, you know, show of good faith in that direction.
Thanks.
All right. Well, being mindful of everyone's time, if there are any other questions that come up for you all, and actually, feel free to be in touch with myself and Misha. Misha is going to be wrangling this for our team. And as far as the process goes, our hope is, you know, we're building a little internal database of all the applications that folks want to get in. So we want to hear from you over email, is like, here we are, this is TND, this is Alston Brighton, this is whomever, like, this is our project that we want your support on, and our team will get that locked in, and then we'll be basically a project manager for helping you get this grant submitted. So that will be, you know, what are the remaining tasks and things that have not yet gone in? What more data do we need to collect? Where are we on the energy efficiency? And we'll be working with you, you know, week by week over the next couple months to help make sure you get a great application in on this. So that is our commitment, so long as solar is a part of it. And if not, you know, we're here to provide general technical assistance. So if you are, let's say you're just doing energy efficiency, we are happy to offer generalized advice and overall like support to you all, as we want to continue to be supporting affordable housing and doing these greening initiatives. And because it doesn't have solar in it, we won't be a part of actually writing the application, but are happy to be a general teammate and resource as you guys are navigating this.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for coming. We will be in touch via email with the, if you want to pass this information on, as well as the slide deck to your colleagues or any other interested parties. That'll be sent out sometime today. But thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Everyone.
Thank you.